My name is JT Van Zant. I'm a fly fishing guide on the Gulf Coast of Texas. Being on the water has always been the secret to unlocking my soul. I just feel like I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing in this life. And that feeling inspires deep thought and conversations with my clients, who are all of varied backgrounds. I truly enjoy sharing perspective on the human experience with folks I take fishing. Drifting, a YETI Presents podcast, was created with the goal of capturing those candid conversations with people who inspire me and sharing them with an audience that has the same sort of restlessness and curiosity that I do. I have found that the best way to provide wisdom and hope for future generations is to learn from the folks that have blazed the trail before us and have made tough decisions in the pursuit of living an extraordinary life. I hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening to Drifting. Roy and Ryan Seiders, the founders of YETI Coolers, grew up in the Texas Hill Country town of Driftwood, just outside of Austin. As a small business owner, their father Roger instilled in his children a love for the outdoors, as well as an entrepreneurial spirit that would serve them well in their future endeavors. In this podcast, Roy and Ryan tell how they discovered a need within the market for a premium cooler, the trials and tribulations of creating that cooler and bringing it to market. With Roy as the idea man and Ryan as the consummate outdoor consumer, we learn how these guys took a small business started in their dad's garage and grew it into one of the largest outdoor brands of all times, and now a publicly traded company. This is truly a story of the American dream realized. Super stoked over the last couple days to hang with my buddies Roy and Ryan Seiders, the founders of the YETI Cooler Company. We've kind of been filming and celebrating the 10-year anniversary of the Tundra series, which is the benchmark product that started this great company. 12 years old now, 10 years of the Tundra. How did all this come to be, you guys?
There's a long story, and I think I can share the kind of the highlights, the treetops with you. Really for Ryan and I, you can't talk about the start of YETI without really going back to our dad and our childhood, and we were born in Houston. Our dad was a school shop teacher down there, a wood shop teacher down there in Houston.
I didn't know you guys were from Houston originally.
Well, my parents grew up here in Austin, but after college, my mom was a nurse down in Houston. My dad was a wood shop teacher, and it was down there where one of our dad's passions was fishing, and fishing down around Galveston and the St. Louis Pass,
Grand Isle,
Louisiana. And he got into custom rod building and building fishing rods for what he was doing down there in Grand Isle and along the Texas coast. And one of his semester projects at school, at the high school he taught at, was building fishing rods. And it was from there that he developed a two-part epoxy for fishing rods. And before this epoxy was around, when they were building custom fishing rods, they would wrap the thread over the guide of the fishing rod, attaching the guide to the blank, and they would use some kind of varnish at the time, like a wood varnish, multiple coats of varnish. And really, that product was a product that I guess failed with time after a year or two of use on that fishing rod. And he was looking for something that he could coat the thread of the fishing rod, but would stand the test of time.
The other one was rigid, so the rod would bend and the coating would stay stiff and crack.
Yeah, that thread would eventually start unraveling and it'd crack up, and so, I guess Roger, our dad, he was frustrated with that piece of the equipment and it failing, and for himself and for his classroom, he was just looking for a solution, and with the help of an epoxy company, developed a two-part epoxy that you coat the thread of the fishing rod.
It is both clear and flexible. And then that's where the name FlexCoat came from, which was a great brand name for us to be exposed to early on. It really, it became like, hey, I'm going to go FlexCoat the rod. I mean, instead of putting epoxy on.
Which almost all rod manufacturers use today,
Rod
right?
manufacturers and custom rod builders, I bet he has a large part of the market, but it's a small market.
Yeah. So to back up, when he developed this product for himself in his classroom, it was the quantities that he was buying was much greater than what he could use by himself and for his classroom. So he started to kit it up into some small 2-ounce packages, and he took them to a local sporting goods store there in Houston that was really big into custom rod building, and that's where the name FlexCoat. He needed a name for the company, for the brand, and FlexCoat was the brand he used. And he went in there and started selling these little 2-ounce kits. Still school teaching as a woodshop teacher on the side. And I think it was one of the buyers there at that sporting goods store asking Roger if he was going to go to a trade show with this product. And the story is he said, "Yeah, I'll be there," and he didn't know what trade show he's talking about, but it's AFMA. AFMA was the name of it.
Yeah, is the same thing ICAST is now, but it used to be called American Fish and Tackle Manufacturers Association, but same as ICAST.
Did it happen to be like in Houston?
No,
at the Dome or something?
I'm trying to remember where
I think that first show was in Dallas.
Could have been.
And this was in the late 70s. He was starting this company the same year I was born, and Ryan was probably 3 or 4. And so he went to that fish and tackle show in Dallas, AFMA. And it's an industry trade show with all the rod manufacturers and reels and lures and everything else in between. And he didn't realize what he had at the time, but when he showed up to that show, just so happens everyone in the industry was looking for a solution, and he had the solution. And not only the custom rod builder like himself, but also the major rod manufacturers at the time, which at the time in the late 70s, those rod manufacturers were
Daiwa,
yeah.
Who else?
Probably Shakespeare,
Daiwa,
yeah.
So
Fenwick.
Fenwick, yeah.
And he wrote a bunch of orders at that show, and
showed up solo, got himself a booth.
Yeah, and all of it was, he wasn't used to, paying that type of prices for a table to set up.
A 10 by 10
rent.
booth and you're renting a table for a couple $100.
Several $100 a day, I imagine.
Yes,
back then,
that's
something
right.
like that.
And so he has just this, the story goes, he just has this table and this 10 by 10 booth, maybe a FlexCoat sign in the background, and a couple good-looking rods laid out with the finish on there, and several 2-ounce bottles and
some little brochures from Quick Copy or something.
Yeah, that's right.
Like
and
a section of a rod with some coated wraps on there.
That's right. And so he wrote a bunch of orders at that show, and at the time he's a school teacher. I bet he's making $20,000 a year as a school teacher, and all of a sudden he's writing $80,000 worth of orders at the show. And this is during the summer months, and he's about to go back to teaching again come September, and I think that's an August show. So he gets back. He's trying to figure out if he can continue to teach and run this small business that's kind of taken off. And in the week he gets back, he writes just as many orders of people calling in. And, the story goes where he's at this booth at the show, and there's just kind of a small crowd around him the whole time because, again, right place, right time, great timing, and the right product. And if you
and a great dude.
Yeah. And so he ended up having to quit his teaching gig and focus on the business. And so that business, FlexCoat, started in his garage, our garage in Houston, and he started with that 2-part epoxy, but quickly started adding a few other accessories and other glues, like glues for building cork handles, the cork rings building up in, rod building equipment, and
Sort of, like engineered some newer epoxies for different uses throughout
right.
the rod building process.
That's right. So he started in Houston, and even today, he still owns and operates it today. It was always a one-man show. Maybe he had at any given time 1 or 2 full-time employees. But I think that exposure with Ryan and I growing up and seeing that firsthand, and him developing products, building catalogs, taking customer service phone calls, calling on accounts, going to trade shows. Growing up when we were kids, our summer vacations were going to these annual trade shows, the AFMA, which later turned into ICAST. That was our summer trip, and every year they'd rotate Dallas, Miami, Las Vegas, whatever, and we'd take our family vacation. And with that, we would try to get in a little, either before or after the show, we'd either do a fishing trip or whatever. Yeah. Obviously we didn't realize what we were getting exposed to, but what we were getting exposed to was kind of the inner workings of a small business.
Yeah, big time.
And it was business 101. In his business, it gave them when he started FlexCoat, it gave my parents the freedom to move back up here to Austin, and really outside of Austin in Driftwood, where Ryan and I grew up. And
is that the place he landed when he came back to Austin?
Yeah.
That very piece of property?
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And so with him wearing all the hats and seeing all the firsthand experience of running a small business, and then going to trade shows and the exposure to other brands, and I think Ryan and I had a good feel for how a small business operates, and especially in that space, in that market, in the fish and tackle space. And then,
the smell of cardboard.
Yes.
In the garage, packing tape, that whole just boxing stuff up, send it out, cha-ching.
Exactly. And paying bills and collecting, and he also got into writing books and literature, small pamphlets on
instructional materials.
Yeah, so you guys were in that book, weren't you?
Yeah, so he did a real simple little book on building fishing rods, just kind of some of his favorite rods, and how to wrap a guide, how to put on the epoxy, how to build the handle, stuff like that. And during, I guess, late high school or early college, me and a buddy were really into fly fishing at the time, so we thought we'd kind of redo his book. It still was relevant, but we wanted to concentrate just on fly rods. So we did this, kind of start to finish fly rod building, kind of the way we like to do it. And you educate the consumers on how we like to do it, which uses his equipment and his epoxy, and you make sure that it talks them through, the right way to mix the epoxy and the right way to glue on a tip top
or shape a cork handle.
Yeah. So we worked on that, during the first part of college and finished it up, and it was a really, really neat little simple book on how to build a fly rod.
Did y'all like work for pay for the company?
Yeah, I definitely.
I think if I remember right,
I was gonna say,
he paid us $5 an hour, and then another $5 an hour on completion.
On the book. Okay, so you got $5 an hour, and then if you actually completed the book, you got a bonus for all the hours you put in.
So you got double.
But I do remember growing up, and in the summer months, like kitting stuff up for because it was, the whole company was right there by our house. We'd go out in the summer months and spend a few hours kitting product up, stapling it, putting on a header, and it's just the type of experience that my kids aren't getting today. Most kids don't get, is like A to Z, a branded consumer product.
Right.
And half his consumers were custom rod builders, and the other half were these bigger brand name fishing rods like G. Loomis, St. Croix, All-Star, Sage, all these other brands that came up as the fish and tackle and rod industry kind of took over. So seeing that firsthand and seeing kind of all things small business, I think, and really just seeing our dad's lifestyle. Then I should also say with our dad, his priority was his family. It wasn't the business, and his priority was having fun, and his version of having fun was being outside and hunting and fishing, and he would not go on a fishing trip without us. He wouldn't go hunting without us. I think that's something Ryan and I struggle with today is growing up, when my dad went hunting or fishing, he had his 3 boys with him in tow. And
From what ages?
As early as I can remember.
Yeah, I was really into the hunting and fishing from an early age, and I remember going with him when I was really young.
4 or 5?
Yes, but where I really remember doing a lot of it is starting around 10, 12 years old, stuff like that.
And so at the time I was
How much younger are you than Ryan?
3.5 years.
Yeah.
So I was probably 6, and we would go down to Grand Isle, Louisiana twice a year. And my dad didn't own a boat, so we'd be bank fishing from, whether it was in the surf, on the jetties, on the piers, or even
Basically,
the bridges.
in Grand Isle, you didn't need a boat. You go down there, summertime, you're surf fishing, wading out there, catching trout in the surf. And in the wintertime, there's roads going all through the marsh down there, through the bay system. You drive around, pull over, and you're catching redfish,
Right off the bridge.
Yeah, so it was our way of getting on the saltwater without having to own a boat.
Was that not necessarily confined to weekends? Since he
during
had
the
freedom
summer,
of owning his own business, y'all were gone.
Yeah, we would go to Grand Isle, I think, for probably a week at a time.
Yeah.
And
Nice.
then we would do a winter trip as well, probably over the Christmas break. And
Everybody load up in the van and head down that way.
yeah.
So fishing was kind of first, and then
Yeah,
seriousness
my
of
dad,
hunting.
if he's way more of a fisherman than any type of hunter, but his dad was a huge quail hunter, so he was exposed to all that. But his first love is definitely fishing. Ryan and I are probably, I don't know, Ryan, if you had a gun to your head, if you would pick fishing or hunting.
Yeah, I don't.
You
I
wouldn't
don't
want
want to pick. The thing about hunting is that it's a little bit more limited time frame. Comes around once a year, where you can pretty much fish year round. So it seems like, when it's time to go hunting, you got to go then. Where fishing, you can kind of, if you can't make it this month, you can go next month.
Or watch the weather.
Yeah,
It's a little more. I got some hardcore fishermen would argue, but I always think of hunting as just the stakes are higher. It's a little more serious. Mm-hmm. Not that it's not as much fun, because maybe it's even more fun, but fishing is just a little more casual.
Yeah,
It doesn't have to be death in fishing.
That's right. You
Yeah.
can't catch and release a trophy buck, I guess, where you can a tarpon.
But they go hand in hand.
That's right. You get the same feeling, and it's being outdoors, but to step back, I think my dad and his family first attitude and being outdoors attitude, I think instilled a passion for all things outdoors with us, and
But also, I think, before Roy and I ever went off to college, seeing the lifestyle that he had running this small business and his flexibility and freedom to do stuff with us, we were thinking, I don't know if we really want a real job after college. We need to figure out our own path to do something.
Did you ever have to get
similar.
one?
No.
Badass to that.
I never put together a resume.
No, never thought
You
about
never
it.
worked for another person, another company. You never had a
No.
dickhead
No.
boss
No.
like screaming
No.
at you for anything.
And,
How
and
about
it
that?
was I knew from an early age that I wanted to start my own company. I just didn't know what it was. I think Ryan had a good idea of what he wanted to do after
Yeah.
college. And college was important to our family and my parents, but for us it was I felt like it was the experience. College is a great experience. It's also gives you a good fallback into
Just
a
a bigger
career path.
picture.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
never used my degree from UT, but I'm glad I did it.
yeah.
Was there ever an idea of like taking the FlexCoat business and growing that, making it and
I
staying
think for
inside
me, I thought about it a lot because, it was, I thought it was a pretty it was a pretty successful lifestyle type business. Put all of us through college, all four of us.
Gave my parents to take us on an annual ski trip.
Yeah.
And put us through college. That was a big deal, and
it definitely
And
crossed
you
my
just
mind over
defined
the years.
success
Yeah.
on his own terms. Your dad included, no boss, raising his three boys and a daughter.
Put four kids through college, and an annual ski trip.
What else do you need?
Yeah, that's it.
And hunting and fishing on the weekends.
Yeah, a couple, some pursuits around fishing and hunting.
So when did that idea sort of taper off, Ryan?
Well, I mean, for me, I was building fishing rods and probably, a fraction of the size of Flex Coat and on making money and on in annual sales. And so even during the fishing rod years, it was a thought of mine to maybe try to figure out how to take over Flex Coat or buy it from my parents or whatever.
But it was always it's such a niche business. Although it's an interesting business, it's very niche, and
Yeah.
it could support my dad and his needs, but it wasn't going to get much bigger than
No,
that.
it could
Right.
support a family.
And you guys knew the confines of it well. There was no
Yes.
new
Yeah.
territory to
No.
explore there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, to back up, I think Ryan, we built custom fishing rods growing up, and that was another way to make money. And then Ryan, probably sometime in middle school or high school, decided, well, I'm going to start a fishing rod company after I get out of college.
Yeah,
And now,
Tell JT a little bit about that.
about the fishing rod company.
Yes.
Yeah, so basically, growing up, exposed to these different rod companies and custom rod builders, and me for extra money instead of mowing lawns, I would build fishing rods, and I built them for myself probably first, and then for people that wanted them, and figured out how to gather up the components, buy the components, and sell them and make a little money off of it, and to go do things that I wanted to do. And so did that through middle school, high school, some in college. And, the day I got out of college, I knew I wanted to start a rod company, be a customer of my dad's, and create a brand name rod. And so that, was 97. I ordered my first set of blanks for a specialized bass fishing rod that we called a scrape rod for fishing in the hydrilla.
okay.
And throwing these big jigs in the hydrilla. And
So would that be stiff all the way down?
yeah, it's like a broomstick, but lightweight, where you can throw these big 1 ounce plus jigs into the hydrilla, punch through the hydrilla.
Super sensitive too.
Yeah, but you're fishing with heavy braided line. Basically, you're just looking for that bite and getting the fish out of the hydrilla
As quick as possible.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, you're not fighting them down
These
there.
guys were using them as tournament.
Yeah, this
fishermen.
was some tournament fishing, and it was a real different rod for the time. And they had been playing around with different rods, and working with them developed the best rod for that situation. That was my first order of 100 blanks from G. Loomis, and started building that, and then started adding on to shallow water coastal rods. I built fly rods, about anything, and then I do a full-on custom rod if someone wanted it. But my goal was to sell to stores and have a line of rods of
Did that
casting.
company have a fly rod, a standard fly rod
Did it?
model? Yeah.
It did, but I was never very successful at selling them through stores. I sold them a lot through individuals, and it all had my model number and all that stuff on it.
Cool.
And that was mainly in the later years. Let's say I did this company for 8 years, and the last 4 years more had a standardized, 9 foot 4-piece 8-weight, 9 foot 4-piece 5-weight. Those were my two standards. You go
And
freshwater fishing, go red fishing, or saltwater.
The name of this company was Waterloo Rods.
Yeah.
And it's still being owned and operated today out of Victoria. But that was
It's super popular in Texas. Did it catch hold like in Florida?
I'd go do those shallow water shows that we were talking about yesterday. The Shallow Water Fishing Expo, Mark Caslow, I believe, put them on, and they were fun. And I met a lot of great people that were super serious about fishing in the Florida market. I had a lot of trouble, connecting with dealers in the area, retailers
yeah.
that for reselling them. But man, I had some good individual customers in Florida that bought a lot of rods from me, and just, would always come my way when they were looking for another rod, or call up describing, this is how I'm fishing in this part of Florida, I need a rod for it. And it was definitely some good times dealing with some of the.
Learned a lot. Putting is kind of using the FlexCoat playbook of building price sheets and a brand name, and customer service and all that stuff. So.
Did you ever get the feeling that would put you where you needed to be?
Oh yeah, I always looked up to companies that were bigger than FlexCoat, like G. Loomis, like Sage, like St. Croix, like All Star Rods, and just other companies like that, Scott Rods in Colorado. I thought I could get there. It was just a little bit too slow moving for me, and maybe I wasn't aggressive enough. And but yeah, I definitely thought it could surpass FlexCoat if I did things right. And after about 8 years of it, I knew what I was making every year, and I could get by and go have a lot of fun hunting and fishing doing that. But I didn't really see a future in supporting a family with that company. And I had an opportunity to sell that business in 2005.
You should tell that story, because Ryan wasn't looking to sell this company; he was looking to continue to grow it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and so one of my best, individual customers lived here in Austin, and I built him a lot of rods over the years. He would buy rods, give them away, and he just, like you were talking about with your shoes, you're afraid they're going to stop making them. So he was afraid I was going to, go out of business or stop making. So he would stockpile these rods. He did not want to run out of these Waterloo rods the way he liked them built, And so one day he called up and he was thinking about leaving Austin and moving to Victoria. He had a place in Port O'Connor, and that was closer. And I think he just wanted the rod company to be down closer to him, and he had someone in mind to run it. And he called me up, probably in early 2005, and asked if I was interested in selling the company. And I said, I hadn't really thought about it. And he threw out a light number on it, and it wasn't enough to get me interested in it. And then, I still remember about, late summer 2005, I was in there working by myself, finishing rods. That's what I did most of, is the final touches on the rod. I had, by that time, Sydney was working for me, and he did a lot of the handles and wrapping, but I like to straighten the guides and finish it, because that's kind of the finishing touches on it, make sure it's
last
perfect.
chance to make it perfect.
Exactly. You can redo anything else until you put that FlexCoat on there. It's a lot more difficult to redo. But anyway, he called me up. I was finishing rods, and he goes, well, what would you sell that company for? And so I thought about it for a second while I was on the phone, and I threw out what I thought was a pretty big number, and he said sold. And as soon as he said that, my heart just sunk, because I knew this guy was serious all the time. He never, when he said something sold, it's done.
Yeah.
So Ryan had just sold his company over the phone.
Over the phone, no backing out.
And Ryan's like, shit, I should have gone twice as high.
Yeah. I couldn't believe I didn't throw out a higher number when he said sold, because I wasn't expecting that to come out of his mouth. And
it was certainly a lot more than the first number he tossed your way.
Oh yeah. And what motivated me to go ahead and do that is I thought about how long it would take me to, at my current pace, to save up that much money. And it would have been, years and years and years to save up that much money at the pace I was going then. And so I thought, this is a good opportunity for me to try something else. And so it wasn't quite as easy as just sold, but he brought in another partner that ended up, doing the deal, and got a few lawyers involved. But in the end, it got sold for what we talked about. And so, the day we closed on that, I left the next day for Colorado on my annual public land elk hunt, bow hunt with a buddy, and spent 2 weeks up there having a blast. Came home, did a bunch of whitetail hunting through the rest of the fall, and then January rolls around and I'm looking for something to do.
So
how is this different than the way you're currently living your life?
It's about the same. It's about the same.
So that was 2005 you sold it. So that's
Yes.
just a year prior to starting YETI.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
right.
basically when January rolls around, I'm looking for something to do. I had thought briefly about going to law school because
I can't imagine that.
Oh, it would have been horrible for me. I was a slow reader, but for some reason, I was a wildlife biology major at Texas A&M, and all these people I would see, year after year, in every class I took, they just kicked my ass in every class. And I was just scraping, barely getting by, just enough to graduate, 2 point something average. And so we were required to take this law class as a wildlife biology major. And these same people that are kicking my ass and everything else, I mean, I was just killing that law class and made an A in it before the curve. And I was pissed when the professor gave everybody a curve up, because I'd actually done well in
the
the
curves.
Yeah, so I was probably under the mistaken impression because of that one class that
You should be a lawyer.
That I could be a lawyer. But that was a thought, and I was looking for something to do a little different. And but luckily, January 2006, I could see Roy was getting more and more busy distributing coolers.
Right.
And I could see he was a little more stressed out, had a higher workload than I thought was probably healthy at the time. So I offered to help out.
Cash is dwindling.
My cash.
You had the stack, and you've
I'd
been
bought
on
a
some
few
trips,
things.
so-
I'd bought a few things, and
Some
I'd
high-end
paid my
optics.
taxes.
Yeah.
Bought a few hunting items, a new over and under shotgun.
New truck.
No. Let me think. I did buy a new truck.
Okay,
Yeah.
so the stack's going down.
Yeah.
Yes.
And at this time, you had a boat company already.
So basically, when I came out of school in 2000, Ryan had already started Waterloo Rods, and I'm okay. I need to figure out my.
You graduated in '97. You got out of college. A&M also.
No, Texas Tech
Texas
up
Tech.
in Lubbock, and to spend a second on Lubbock, I wouldn't change that for the world because it had first class bird hunting up there, and it was a great school and a good community. And
You ever heard it's a great place to be from, but I wouldn't want to visit there?
I would love to live there. I would actually love to live
That's
there.
a
But
Butch
I hear that
Hancock
saying.
Yeah.
Happiness is Lubbock, Texas, in my rearview mirror.
Oh,
That's
yeah.
a good saying. But anyway, I actually, when I got out of school and trying to figure out what am I going to do? Ryan had this fishing rod company. I was back in Driftwood with my parents.
All this was kind of based out of Driftwood. We had 10 acres out there. My parents' house that we grew up in from the time I was, 10 or 11.
Yeah.
And we had a house next door that I was operating the rod company out of it. And then we had my dad's 25 by 75 foot building there that, everybody kind of hung out during the work day,
Is the one right by the house always been the Flex Coat
Oh, yeah,
office?
always since
and
we-
the other barns where you shape cork and stuff over there? Is that
Yep.
has that always been there too?
That has, but it used to, it's been redone. So it used to have, limestone floors and just a tin shed that was open air.
Okay.
And
I forgot about that.
That was more of just a
Those are the good old
utility
days.
type shed on the
yeah,
property.
and that's where we did all our cork work. We had one little room that was, not much bigger than this right here that we did all of our cork work in.
With the chicken coop right there as well.
Yeah,
Remember
yeah.
that? So I start messing around with different projects. Start trying to make a small business, and we would sight in our deer rifles right in the front yard in Driftwood, and do just rifle shooting out there. We had a pile of dirt and some targets out there, and we had a 100-yard. And we'd set up right next to the building and shoot downrange at these targets. And one of my thoughts was making this little foldable shooting bench and selling that. And I made some, and I sold some to some local retailers like McBride's, and then I'd sell some to friends and family, but kind of realized that wasn't going to take me anywhere. And then my dad Roger was already, as a hobby, kind of building boats for the way we fish on the Texas coast, these these high-end aluminum boats. And they were a tunnel hull, little 5-degree V on the bottom. And he would build them for himself and us, and then occasionally a friend would ask to buy one, and we'd sell one of ours, and he'd build another one and continue to look to improve it. So I solved that and said, well, maybe I can turn that into a business and start a little boat company.
We're all boat nuts.
Yeah, that's right.
Anything to be near or work on a boat.
It's fun, isn't it?
It's super fun.
The only problem with the boat business is everyone has a different idea of what the perfect boat should be.
Yeah.
And so it's highly customized. And so I started driving down to Florida to this aluminum boat manufacturer and building boats to our specifications, bring them back up to driftwood, and kind of with this raw aluminum hull and rigging them out with a, we'd put in this rubberized floor.
Was that with like marine ply and then?
Yeah, it's kind of
coated?
It was some kind of rubber.
It is a rubber you would pour out and then sprinkle in
yeah,
like ground up
gotcha.
rubber in it.
Sure.
It's self-level. It's
Yeah.
self-leveled,
And
and
it's almost like
it's
ground
set
up tennis
It's
ball
set up.
rubber, in there for traction. So, but instead of like something real rough like sand, and then you let it set up, and then you paint it like a marine gray.
Yeah, and you'd use this epoxy paint that's real good for a marine environment.
Yeah.
Hey, let's pause here for a second. I gotta take a piss.
Okay.
I want to mention something interesting about our childhood and our dad was because he was an ex wood shop teacher. He had the kind of the woodworking equipment, table saws, band saws, all that jazz, and we were always up to something, building stuff, and out of wood, and whether it was like I remember building these little wooden toolboxes with him, or rubber band guns, or some of our bigger projects might have been a deer blind.
Think how instrumental that was in the development of y'all's
Yeah.
brains in terms of like, this part of this thing I love is terrible. I'm gonna make. And Roger told me that story. Like, if you guys kind of wanted something, if it was possible to produce it yourselves first, that's the route.
Yeah,
you guys would
and
take.
that was like product design 101 was just building stuff out of wood. So again, we didn't know what we were being exposed to, and all these things, whether it was his passion for the outdoors and him being a family man and him running a small business and us being exposed to that small business, and then his woodworking and us always building stuff, all those things kind of led up to,
I would say primarily being dedicated to you guys as number one, and
Yeah.
being present, making the time to be with y'all that much.
That's right.
It's
That's
super
right.
important.
Something else that was interesting, where we lived in Driftwood, across the street from our house, my parents leased like 200 or 300 acres from the Roberts, which is the Salt Lick family, and it has Onion Creek there, and so we had access to the like outdoors hunting and fishing across the street from our house.
Yeah, right down the highway.
And looking back, so we were bow hunting for whitetails, we were dove hunting, we were turkey hunting, we were running up and down the creek, canoeing, fishing, catching black bass, channel cat, doing drop lines in the creek. And at the time, I just thought every kid had that kind of access to the outdoors, and I really probably took it for granted that, what we had. And not is probably later in life, probably college or even after college, where looking back, like that was pretty unique for Ryan and I and our family. And
I mean, there were summers where every morning, first thing you do is wake up, grab your little handmade tackle box and a 5-foot ultralight spinning rod, and you walk a mile down to where the creek was and fish. And that particular summer, I think it was '84, it was pretty dry, and the creek had stopped running, and it was like fishing a big, long, stock tank type deal. And
so the fish were concentrated.
Yeah.
So.
And so, I mean, we hammered on the channel cats, black bass, perch, everything,
It makes perfect sense that you guys were constantly looking for a project that inspires you versus a job to make money.
Yeah.
The money came as a consequence of putting something together that was meaningful to you.
It was about trying to combine your passion for hunting or fishing with something that can support you.
Yeah.
And another thing that I think about often is if Roy and I didn't have this passion and kind of like a little bit over the top on hunting and fishing, we could have never started YETI. You gotta be passionate about something, and
You would have just been okay with the shitty cooler.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. You would have been okay with the shitty cooler, and it would have been hard to add value to a shitty cooler because you wouldn't know what you actually need
You have to actually go do the stuff to figure it out.
Right.
Yeah.
So about the time he sold Waterloo rods,
Yeah,
you were putting boats together.
Yeah, I was assembling boats and trying to make a business out of that, and getting the aluminum hull in Florida, bringing them up to Austin, and putting in that rubber floor, putting in a center console, wiring it up, maybe hanging something like a 90 horse Yamaha, and these were little tunnel holes, and for fishing the back lakes of the Texas coast and chasing redfish. And everything about the boat was really, simple for the way we used these boats, and well thought.
They were Balmer, super tough.
Yeah, they were tough, and that durability was except for the cooler. And really, the cooler that was available to me at the time didn't match up to the rest of the quality of the boat. And we would use the coolers for keeping our fish fresh or the drinks cold. But we would also put them in front of the center console and behind the center console. You use it as a bench seat, and occasionally you'd put one up out on the bow of the boat, and we would take a half-inch piece of plywood and mount it to the top of the cooler, so you wouldn't cave in the lid.
Yeah, we'd put the flex coat on top of it to kind of seal it off, sprinkle in some sand so it had a little grit. And that was the way you could toughen up one of those coolers, where you could use it as a casting platform.
So we were modifying coolers well before YETI. And there's a really cool old picture of Ryan back in the late 90s fishing down in the Florida Keys for tarpon. And he's standing up on the bow of the boat. There's kind of a storm cloud in the background, and it's a shitty cooler with a half-inch piece of plywood on the top, and strapped down with some yellow bungee cords.
That was a terrible feeling. You guys kind of made it go away. I remember standing on those things and caving in parts of the lid, so trying to go to the edges where it was a little stiffer and do this balancing thing on this terribly made product that you relied on.
That's right. And so if you look at that picture, you could point to that picture, although it was 10 years before YETI, you could point to that picture and say, hey, there's the origin. That's it. That's the origin of YETI. And so I'd use these coolers on the boats, and you go out pounding across the bay and as a seat, and that lid would cave in, and the little to no use, the hinges would break, the latches would snap off, and you'd be just frustrated in having to replace the cooler out after every other trip. So, Ryan was at a trade show with his fishing rod company, and I remember him giving me a call one day and said, hey, I'm out here in Florida. I found this cooler that might be a pretty good setup for your boat. And I did a little research and found the contact for that cooler, and started bringing them in and putting them on a boat. And this was really what got me into the cooler business, boats, and finding this original rotomolded cooler.
I believe that was probably around 2002.
Yeah, and so I became a distributor for this Thailand-made cooler. It was a heavy-duty product, and I started. I think that I quickly realized that I could actually make money in the cooler business, and I took that Thailand cooler and I started setting up retailers around Austin and San Antonio and Houston.
And about that time, quickly phased out of building boats because
because I was actually making money in the cooler business.
Yeah.
So just stop.
I did go parallel for a little bit, selling a handful of boats, but I actually could make money. I never made money in the boat business. I could make money in the cooler business. And, so I distributed that cooler for a few years and learned a lot about the cooler business, and also learned, although that was a great product for when you compare it to a commodity type cooler that you find at Walmart, and those early coolers that I was putting on my boat is definitely a step up from that. It had its own shortcomings. And, I started losing sleep thinking about what the ultimate cooler might look like and solving for these failure points and that's primarily around hinges and latches and anytime you have failure, whether it's out in the field or whatever, that just causes problems. And thinking through the way we use coolers, we put coolers on boats and we strap them down, and we can't have a lid that flies open when you're pulling your boat down the road or it's in the back of your truck. So you need some heavy duty latches. So I sold that Thailand cooler for a few years and realized that that I could go out and do something on my own and not be just a distributor to someone else's design and brand. That I could go start something, and about that same time, Ryan was selling his fishing rod company, and I was starting to go overseas to visit with different manufacturers overseas, and that's the origin of YETI in 2006. And the original YETI products, they were good, but we knew we could improve them. And about 2008 is when we had a chance to build a cooler from the ground up. And by that time, I'd been in the cooler business for 5 or 6 years, and I knew what I wanted. And we built the Tundra from the ground up. All these little things were stepping stones. My dad's business, us being exposed to the outdoors, Ryan's fishing rod business, and then, the getting into the cooler business and kind of the evolution that I went through as a distributor, and then losing sleep thinking about what makes a great cooler and applying that to the way we use the product. And so in 2006, when we started the company, we felt like we were onto something. We felt like it could support both Ryan and I.
Were you guys already at the Driftwood 1826 in 2006?
Yeah. By that time, we'd moved into.
So by the time that the Tundra was designed and on the market, you were already in that facility?
Yeah. And I remember seeing you over there a few times. And so we thought we were onto something. Obviously, never in our wildest dreams did we ever think YETI would become what it has. And I think as we launched the Tundra line in 2008, we saw this tipping point with the brand. And really that was built on, first of all, a great product, the YETI Tundra.
It seems so recent, doesn't it?
I know, it really does.
It is recent. To you guys?
Well, in many ways, it feels like yesterday, but you look back at this thing and it feels like a million years ago as well.
Based on the growth of the company.
That's right.
Yeah.
When we landed on the YETI Tundra in 2008 and started putting some thought into building the brand, telling the story, the wildly stronger, keep ice longer story, and taking that message to a broader market, I think that's when you saw this tipping point. And that storytelling happened, a few ways. First of all, we stumbled across the Walt Larson, who became one of our early kind of creative marketing guys. Tell them the story about Walt.
Basically, I think I was at a trade show probably in 2007, the ICAST show in Orlando, and Walt had been walking around the show, and he came up to me at the booth when I wasn't talking to anybody and said, "Hey, I've walked this whole floor, and your product is the only one that really gets me excited. You got a great product, but you're not doing a very good job telling the story." And I'd talked to some advertising agencies and stuff before, but never had the confidence to hire one.
And really what gave you the confidence on Walt was some of the other brands that
so he started talking to me about some of the other brands he was associated with, and it was heavily influenced by, or most of his brands were in the bow hunting industry. I was a big bow hunter, and so I actually then recognized him from this Cuddyback commercial, I believe, this trail camera commercial that he had done, that he was actually in the commercial. But he'd been involved in Matthews Bows, which kind of took over a big part of the market, and he was involved from the beginning up until around that time. One crazy story was Rage Broadheads that he was involved with, talking about there was already a broadhead company. You think about broadheads, been around forever, and that's a mature marketplace, not really growing that much, and everything's there. So this one broadhead company came up with this new technology, the slip cam technology, kind of expandable blade, and in order to make it different, he encouraged them to come up with a new brand name of broadheads instead of using the old company name that they had bought, and in 2 years, I think they had 50% of the broadhead sales in the U.S. in a mature market, just through educating the consumer, doing the right advertising on the outdoor type channels. And so basically everything he was associated with in the bow hunting industry, what I viewed as kind of top of the class. And I remember a lot of his old ads from like Matthews Bows and some of the targets, the Glendale Buck and Block 4x4 and stuff like that. And so anyway, that kind of gave me confidence to try to start teaming up with this guy. And I don't know if I said this earlier, but he said we weren't doing a good job of telling the story.
You did, yeah.
Yeah, and so he had looked through our catalog a little bit, and he was a big believer in using customer testimonials of ambassadors, print ads, but starting out and showing growth through your print ads. Like, you don't want to start out buying a full page, you start out buying a quarter or half page, and the customers want to feel like they contributed as you educate them. They want to feel like they contributed to the growth of the company. So they want to see the ads get bigger in the magazines, and then on television you're telling your story rather than leaving it up to some PR firm to get some free press for you that the writer makes up his own version of the story. But he gave us the confidence to start advertising on television.
And so we had all the, like, in our head, we had all the things that made our product great, but in the end, it was Walt that took those things, got them out of our head and into a really digestible story. And it started with, our tagline of wildly stronger, keep ice longer, and then all these other things that kind of built up to that. And now I remember telling customers over the phone when they called up and said, what makes your cooler durable? I'd say, well, it's rotomolded. And, well, what does that mean? I said, well, do you know what a whitewater kayak? Of course, yeah. Well, those are rotomolded, and that visual of a whitewater kayak getting beat up, all of a sudden they understood, oh, I get it. And so Walt taking that message and saying, YETI coolers are rotomolded like whitewater kayaks, and having this picture of a kayaker going over a rocky ledge, and then a full frame gasket, 2 inches of polyurethane foam, gives you the ability to hold ice. And so all these little, and then testimonials that kind of supported that message as well. Before, we had an early ambassador through our relationships with some of the, and maybe you should talk a little bit about Flip.
Yeah,
and how that came to be.
Going to the trade shows with my dad in high school or whenever, I had these people that I looked up to in the fishing industry. Most of them had to do with either writing articles or some sort of, television fishing show. And Flip had Walker's Cay Chronicles, which was just
best show ever.
Yeah,
it was awesome.
Unbelievable. And the music would get you so pumped up at the beginning of that show. You're ready, you watch it, you're ready to go fishing.
I literally found my tribe through that show, because I loved to bass fish, but I wasn't the tournament style.
Yeah.
The clothing didn't appeal to me. The sort of I didn't share similar goals with that community of fishermen. And then Walker's Cay Chronicles is.
I think Flip probably
me.
brought more people to saltwater fly fishing than anyone based off that show.
And it was
I
on
would imagine
ESPN.
so.
Everybody had access to ESPN, and it was just a great show.
So go back to us. We'd go to these industry trade shows with our dad, and guys like Flip Pallett were there, and we knew them, and Jose Wahebi and Chico Fernandez and
Billy Pate and
Lefty Cray.
Yeah, and you would basically, I would wait around. They'd be in a conversation with someone, so I'd stand off in the distance, wait for them, the perfect timing. They'd free up from that conversation, then
Ryan would be right in there.
Yeah, talking to them about something, trying to learn something, or trying to give them something from Flex Code or whatever, But over the years, I stayed in touch with Flip, and he was always sponsored by rod company, a couple different ones over the years, and so I was building fishing rods, and there was a type of 5-foot plug rod that nobody was building at the time.
That he was telling you.
Yeah, that he was telling me. He's pretty old school, and so people had kind of gotten away from this 5-foot plug rod. He was explaining all the advantage of it. Well, I can build that, and so I talked to him about handle length and how the rod should perform. What type of lures you're throwing with it, and built him a couple, and he really used them a lot over the years. And so, when he come on his annual spring Texas turkey hunt, up a couple hours from north of Austin, he'd invite me. I'd drive up there with him and go turkey hunting and hang out. And it was always a lot of fun to hang out for a weekend with him there doing that. And when we'd go to the trade shows in Florida, me and my buddy TJ, we'd have time to kill in between. He always offered us his Old Town, I think, Tripper XL canoe, a 20-foot canoe, and kind of point us in the right direction around where he lived at the time in Mims. I guess he still lives there now. But anyway, we had fun hanging out and learning stuff from him up there,
So as we started YETI, and Ryan had this relationship with Flip, and he started sending him coolers. And one thing about all these fishing and later hunting ambassadors, none of them have been approached by a cooler company. They were sponsored by high-end optics, fly rods, reels, name it, and they were sponsored by different categories. But coolers weren't. They
were nothing to celebrate at the time.
Yeah, coolers were mass market. They weren't focused on hunting and fishing, and so there was a void there. And Ryan started sending them coolers and just getting feedback from Flip, and I think he reached back out to you one day.
Yeah. Basically, anytime we'd come out with something new or he needed a cooler, I'd send it to him. One day I was talking to him in the warehouse over the phone, and he said, "Hey, if you ever need any help with marketing, let me know. I'd like to be a part of it." And at the time, we hadn't been doing a whole lot of advertising. We were in the early days, but it was a good timing for him to bring that up. We had been maybe
that was probably on the beginning of the conversations with the Walt, and okay, we got this story based off of Wildly Stronger, Keep Ice Longer, and we have our first ambassador, Flip.
And at the time, only the Tundra series.
Yeah,
and the sizes from like 15 all the way up to 120.
Yeah, I mean, a full range of sizes and
the colors.
I think is white,
maybe a little tan.
Maybe a little tan.
Okay.
The origin is coastal and boating, but then our secondary passion is obviously hunting. So kind of that tan was kind of our hunting.
Earthy, camo oriented. Gotcha.
Yeah, that's right. And so it was with Flip and Walt. It's kind of perfect timing on telling the YETI Tundra story, and taking that message to a broader market using print ads, and then later doing a 30-second commercial to be aired on the Outdoor Channel, and using Flip Pallet, using the cooler as a platform to pull around on, and him talking about all the talking points, rotomolded like a whitewater kayak, and we'd show a kayak, and then he'd end the commercial by, I've been buying coolers all my life, no more. I found YETI, and then Wildly Stronger, Keep Ice Longer, and that point in time, we have a solid product that has a foundation of all these earlier generations and everything that we've learned and put to work. And then
that marketing had an impact. It was, yes. You could feel it.
Oh, it was a tipping point. So before that, those early years, those first 2.5 years of YETI, we were out there hustling to get business. Ryan was going to a ton of trade shows, and then we were hitting every retailer in the marketplace.
Still at $10 an hour?
By that time, I was probably making less, because Roy and we were low rollers, had low overhead, and we were just leaving the money in the company. We didn't need much to get by. I would take out money as I needed it.
Were y'all trying to borrow at the time, or were you being refused loans based on how?
No, we had a working line of credit at the bank.
Okay.
And that helped. And then we every dollar that was earned off the product, we'd put right back into the business to grow our inventory levels, to buy more tools, to whatever.
And that really helped out where we didn't have to go out and leverage up the company or borrow money other than that line of credit, which we actually used like we were supposed to, build inventory and pay it back off, you know.
Yeah, during the peak seasons.
Yeah, and so, you know, it was important for Roy and I to be able to fund the growth of YETI, and it always seemed to just work out.
Yeah, I mean, the earnings of the product funded the growth. And we weren't taking, I mean, we were low rollers outside the company and just putting those earnings right back into growing the business. And I think when we realized we had a tiger by the tail and that, got that marketing message out there, and all of a sudden our version of sales is answering the phone, that's when we started, okay, this is much bigger than us. It's much bigger than Ryan and I.
It's much bigger than just a normal lifestyle company.
Yeah,
that
like
we
our
were
dad
used to.
Yeah, with our dad's company and seeing him own and operated for the last 40 years, it was just like, this is not that. This is something much bigger. Now, let's get help, and let's get the right help. And those early folks like the Johnny Caballas and Micah Thompson and then the David Bullocks and so on, the list could go. I mean, they were just the key.
Right, you guys have had some fabulous talent over the years.
That's right.
Continue
and
to.
there's folks that showed up at the right time and to help manage the growth. And I think Ryan and I have done a lot of things right, and a lot of it was timing and luck and finding the right people. But most importantly, finding the right people.
Yeah.
And it's both bringing the internal people in with the right skill set and the right mindset. To those early folks, they had to wear all the hats because it was still a small, nimble team. To later on, where you're hiring a specialist that could come in and bring in years of experience of whether it's marketing or product engineering or whatever it might be. And then even finding the right outside folks as well. Flip Pallet, Walt Larson. We got the right people at the right time. That's
Have
for
you
sure.
guys ever talked to or become friends with anyone who's become successful in an environment that parallels Yeti's success? Can you think of or name a company that has a trajectory like Yeti has?
Not in the outdoor space. I mean, there's plenty of it. There's plenty of it out there. Probably around technology but
I suppose.
But in and there's plenty of successful consumer product companies
that in 10 years have built an empire like Yeti has?
I don't know.
I was trying last night, just the thought came up, and I can't think of any company that matches. I'm sure, like you said, maybe some chip manufacturer or some pharmaceutical company that invented a wonder drug, but that's locked into a passion-driven product that's surrounded by outdoors and fun, good times. Like,
one funny thing for me is, like, as a kid, my dream to have a successful rod company, that was big. Like
that would have been a St. Croix or Sage.
St. Croix, Sage, G Loomis. Those are the ones that I thought about. And we went to the Fly Tackle Dealer Show. We were going to that show, and they have a little magazine associated with that industry trade show. And they wrote an article in there talking about, Yeti being at the show and don't forget where you started. Now that your sales are bigger than our whole industry, than our whole trade show combined. This one company, sales is bigger than everybody that's displaying at that show, and that's how they ended the article. Don't forget where you came from.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yeah.
I mean,
y'all are the mothership of the outdoor industry.
So to have a business,
that article kind of freaked me out.
Yeah.
We used to go to that trade show as kids,
looking up to all the companies in there,
and it was great brands like Able, Sage, Loomis, all these Sims, whatever. And now we're still exhibiting at that show with our company, and they're writing an article on "Don't forget where you came from, bastards." Yeah. Again, it's been a wild ride.
I would think that feeling occurred over and over for you guys. It's not like it got to a level where all of a sudden you went, "Oh my God, this is bigger than we ever imagined."
Yeah.
That moment has happened over
And
and
over.
over and over again. And
Yeah.
if you look at some of the older ads and the type of commercials with the strong man and the white background and
Yes.
and you popping on screen while
Yes. Yes.
stronger keeps ice longer. Those became like vintage campaigns within a year or two because the level that you had to climb to keep up with the business.
Yeah,
just-
there
it was just
wasn't one
exponential in all directions.
There wasn't one moment that I said, "Oh gosh, I mean, this is way bigger." It's everyday type deal. Where,
Yeah.
and I still come into the office today, and I look at, the campus that we have,
Yeah.
and the building, and the cafeteria, and I'm like, "What the hell? Where did this come from?"
How do you guys think that the success of YETI has changed you as individuals? For better and for worse.
Are we still rolling?
And to start that off,
So here.
when did you start calling your dad Roger?
That was we when we were kids, we called him Roger because he did a lot of shotgun shooting when he was growing up, a lot of quail hunting, a lot of skeet shooting, stuff like that. I mean, they just lived around shotguns, and he was always real hard of hearing, had the ringing in his ears.
Yeah,
And-
he ruined his ears, and so did his brothers.
Yeah,
from all
and so saying dad just didn't get his attention, but if you yell, Roger, get his attention by yelling his name, and it just stuck. I mean,
That was the sole purpose of Roger?
yeah,
Is
just
that-
so you could get his attention.
Yeah,
Gotcha.
Yeah.
and he's a
Mom is sometimes Pat, but not always. There's
No,
kind of
yeah.
back and forth there.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. I think looking at the success of YETI and finding the right people, but also recognizing that timing and luck went into it. When we showed up to the marketplace, because of the environment of commodity type coolers, they were mass market. They were in Walmart and Target. It left this huge void in the sporting goods space, and every customer that walked in those doors, they were using coolers, and in the what I call specialty retailer, which would be Fishing Tackle Unlimited in Houston, McBride's here in Austin, Sportsman's Finest, whoever it might be. Those guys really weren't in the cooler business, although every single customer that walked in their doors was a cooler user and a
Right.
potential buyer, and a premium product that's 5-10x of an ordinary cooler. It's not for everybody, but if you can convert that small percentage of consumer that can appreciate the value around durability and ice retention, I think that was seeing that void in the marketplace and recognizing that we're not replacing a product on those shelves, whether it's a sporting goods store or even a hardware store or a marine store, whatever. Those guys weren't selling coolers. We were actually filling their shelves and giving them something that was different than the piece of shit cooler down the street at Walmart.
Right.
And and it was really our frustrations around ordinary coolers. That was one void. The second void was the marketplace, the channels that didn't have a product. And we gave them that product.
Maybe a third void would be the outdoor industry, ambassadors or professionals that weren't involved with any cooler
Being
company.
Yeah,
utilized
so
to sell
Had you come
coolers.
out with a new bow that was the best one out there, they still have relationships with other bow companies. Had you come out with a fishing rod, no one was sponsored by a cooler company.
It was flip pallet first, and then hunting. We got Jim Shockey and all these guys that around hunting and fishing, Jose Wahebi and you name it. We were initially giving them product because there's no reason they can't accept it. They didn't have a competing product, and then they would use it. It would show up on their shows. They'd fall in love with the cooler. We'd ask for a testimonial. We'd put the testimonial in our catalog on our website, and then later, when we could afford it, we'd actually sponsor their show, and
tell our 30-second. I mean, what you wanted was to tell your 30-second version during the commercial break, and you wanted natural product integration during the television show.
Yeah, and the outdoor channel is a relatively inexpensive channel, but it's what that hardcore consumer watches. The hardcore consumer like ourselves that were fishing and hunting on their weekends, and that was where their passion during the weekdays or whatever, when they had a chance, they'd be watching the outdoor channel, watching all those different shows. I think after that kind of that tipping point of telling the story and growing the business and bringing in people, and then realizing that the brand it's much bigger than the product itself. You started seeing people wearing the YETI hats, and we started throwing in YETI hats into each cooler that we sent out the door. And in the early years, when someone was wearing a YETI hat, it was someone you knew, as a family member, it was a friend, or a friend of a friend. So you knew that person, and all of a sudden you started seeing people wearing the hat, and you didn't know that person. That was kind of a funny feeling.
Yeah.
Is they're wearing the hat because they like the brand and what it represents. But also recognizing that the brand is bigger than that hard cooler, the Tundra line, and we could leverage what YETI stands for, that brand, around quality, durability, and apply it to some other categories like soft coolers.
I would
Like
say,
what we're up to
having
today.
known you guys before you started a wildly successful company, you haven't drifted too far from your roots. You still love to hunt and fish. How would you say that life changes for someone who experiences success on the level you guys have?
Roy, you want to take it or
You better take it.
I mean, for me, I guess the struggle is, I don't think I've changed that much, through YETI, although I don't have to think about what I'm spending money on anymore. And that's, now, I used to go drive my dad's van to the Florida Keys with one other buddy. We'd either take first we were just sleeping in the van during the daytime, fishing under bridges at night, and because we didn't have a boat. Then we transitioned into taking canoes down there. Then we ended up taking aluminum boats down there. And I think I've driven to the Florida Keys probably 15 times. Well, I guess now, and during a 2-week trip, when we'd get out of school in the middle of May and spend the last 2 weeks of May there during tarpon season, we might be able to save up the money to hire a guide for one of those days. And now being able to, through connections at YETI, have the access to the very best guides, to be able to afford to pay them, and fish. I think I fished 19 days in the Florida Keys this year, all with one of the best guides down there. It's just hard to limit your passion and balance that with family, and get the family to come down there. Whatever you can do to it's just a little more accessible now, and you don't have to think about it as much how you're going to pull this stuff off. And it's, I saw this spring and summer, I saw a lot of cool stuff in the Florida Keys, and down in Port O'Connor, having the shallow water boats. Used to, we had to drive to Louisiana to catch saltwater fish, to catch the redfish and the trout. Now, Roy and I have, 3 poling skiffs down there, a little tarpon boat, and more of a family drift fishing boat, and so you have access to do whatever you want to down there.
I think the pursuits haven't changed. The access has gotten a little bit easier. I think we always put ourselves out there and trying to figure out how to go hunt whitetail in incredible places like Kansas or the Texas Panhandle or South Texas. We figured out how to do that before YETI.
Yeah.
Now Ryan and I share a place in South Texas, and we have the resources to kind of do it on a bigger scale, and we also get to share it with friends and family, which is really cool.
Yeah.
I would never have thought that I would have the resources to have friends, family members, and share this beautiful resource with, and that have the same passion for the outdoors that Ryan and I do. And that goes with our, what we have down on the Texas coast as well. We have the resources down there, a house and a boat, and it's fun to be able to share that with other folks, whether it's people at YETI or friends and family. So for those first years of YETI, first 5 to 8 years, I'd say maybe 8-9 years of YETI, it was a grind.
I was going to say, you probably didn't have much time in those
That's right.
early days to
And I think we sacrificed.
chase recreation.
Ryan stopped going to elk hunting in Colorado because you just couldn't. You couldn't. We had this opportunity in front of us, and you had to sacrifice to to make the most of it. And that was a little bit of a sacrifice on not just outdoors, but I had a young family at the time, and I remember putting in long hours and not seeing them as much as I wanted to. And also, friends took a back burner, and health, we weren't taking care of ourselves. And I think the success of YETI has really flipped our priorities around from the company to, back to family, friends, health, taking care of yourself. In the end, there's a lot of redfish that we want to catch, and we want to be here for a long time. And the key to that is taking care of yourself. And I do think we still struggle with the balance of what we want to do around hunting and fishing and family, and putting family first and our health first. But it's a lot easier these days to kind of line up the priorities.
Yeah, and we're always, Roy and I talk often about how our kids are going to turn out, and what we can do. We had a unique lifestyle growing up, and I remember hunting for deer in the Texas Hill Country. It's known for small whitetail deer, small antlered whitetail deer, small body.
And being over the top excited about a little shitty 8-pointer.
Yeah, a Hill Country 8. I mean that was your goal for the season, to find. It was probably a 2-year-old Hill Country 8-pointer.
So to that point, raising kids with the success of YETI, first of all, they don't get that firsthand experience that Ryan and I had of a small business world.
Yeah, how do you replicate that?
I don't know. It's hard to, and I don't know how you do it.
It seems like a model worth repeating.
Yeah, and but they won't get that firsthand experience, and they
couldn't they just start working in taping some boxes?
But the beauty of FlexCoat was, it was all there.
Yeah.
The phones were ringing. You were answering the phone. You're packaging. You're kitting. You're shipping, all right there in this little shop. YETI, the warehouse is 200 miles away.
Distribution center.
The customer service is all on one floor. The product design and engineering is in a different area. All that was in one little area at FlexCoat, and you saw my dad doing all of it. It was just a one-man show. So our kids will not get that same exposure, not only in the business, but like Ryan said, chasing hill country whitetails that, man, all you're trying to do is kill an 8-pointer,
and then you're dreaming. I mean, South Texas was like unbelievable. If you could get down there on a day lease or something, just to get down in the area where big bucks lived, and now our kids are, they love going down to our place down there in South Texas, and they're catching 3 and 4 pound bass all the time, and the deer down there are ridiculous, and it's just how do you work your way up when you have access to that kind of stuff?
The best in the world, yeah.
Yeah, and I think when we were starting YETI, we were definitely outside of our comfort zone, and sticking our neck out, traveling overseas to visit with these manufacturers, but we didn't have a way to fall back. We didn't have a safety net, and it was putting yourself out there on a limb and kind of taking big chances.
With those risks come that feeling of reward.
That's right. Yeah. And how do you duplicate that? So I think for Ryan and I, our biggest thing is, how do you raise kids that are grounded in reality, but also can kind of stick their neck out, take risk, and find their own passion.
And just be a good person.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Stick them with Roger for the summer. FlexCoat's still there.
That's right.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, just stick them.
My summers in Driftwood were probably, they were the best. They were the best.
How has life gotten more complicated? Maybe some of the reasons you just described. And having so many options of what to do. Luckily, you guys, it's so ingrained in you what you love that it's not like you're going to start going to Kentucky Derbies or start following F1 around the world. You want to fish and hunt.
Yeah. It's just, for me, part of my day every day is dealing with with some of the good complications that we have with the success of Yeti, dealing with the ranches, the Port O'Connor place, keeping all that organized. We've got employees that work for us at these places that are great people, and communicating with them on a daily basis. So you're involved and know what's going on, because it's our passion to be involved. But we live in Austin with our family. We can't be down there, all the time, and so.
And it's whether it's the South Texas Ranch or Port O'Connor or whatever else we have going on, it's almost like running a little small business, because you do have employees and you do have expenses and you do have all these other things.
Right.
And, because of the awareness that Yeti has brought Ryan and I a little bit into the spotlight, you do get a lot of folks reaching out, wanting to talk about whether it's a product idea or just, hey, do you mind, going to lunch, and I'm trying to start my own business and whatever, bouncing off ideas. So, I guess time is our most precious resource these days, and you can't be all things to everybody, and it's hard to, people that are asking for our time, whether it's just catching up over an idea they want to share with us, or pitching something to Yeti, or pitching something to us personally, it's a constant game of like saying no, but in the politest way possible. That's not
most respectful way.
Yeah, the most respectful. That doesn't.
I saw Roy, especially in the later years of him being CEO. He was good at saying no, and that he had to be that way in order to keep track of everything else that was going on important in Yeti. And I learned a little bit from that. I still I don't say no as easily as Roy does, but it you have to prioritize, and you can't do it all. You got to pick your most important things, and especially during those last years of Roy as CEO.
And even today, you got to prioritize, and those priorities are family, health, friends, outdoor pursuits, and anything that's distracting from that or taking you away from that is not. We got to say no to it, and it's hard to, because you got a lot of people and a lot of things that what Ryan and I have learned at Yeti and our access and resources, it's hard to say no, because those things can be helpful to other folks. And but I think part of our responsibility is giving back to all the this success came from a lot of luck and help and people that were giving to us along the way as well.
And you do learn what what worked for Yeti. So in a real short amount of time, if someone has a new business idea or an idea that they've started looking for some advice on, I have some quick talking points that I can go through about advertising and
finding the right people.
Yeah, and it's just something that I've told over and over. It might not work for your business, but it's what worked for Yeti, and you can take what you want out of what we learned and apply it to your new business. And I think there's been a lot of good things come out of that.
That's awesome.
And I think that the success of Yeti has allowed us, Ryan and I, to step back out of Yeti, and kind of, we're still involved with Yeti, but it's way more at our own pace. And so we got a team that's fantastic and running the show, and they don't need our input, but we get to go in there and kind of create chaos when we want to, and that's mainly around the brand or products. And I'm still very involved with the product team. So I think the success of Yeti, it's given us the freedom to kind of pull back from Yeti, and we are surrounded by a great team, a team that is way more capable and has the skill set to face the challenges that come with Yeti today. And Ryan and I are involved with YETI, but it's more at our own pace. And so my day at YETI might be going up to the Innovation Center and tinkering around on projects up there. And I still have a huge passion for products. And that's still where I feel like I can add some value. And we have the resources and the team. And so I spend my time with the product team up at the Innovation Center, with the engineers. And that's where my passion is. And that's where...
There's a real
that's the
eagerness
fun.
out there amongst the consumers, because so far we've witnessed the improvement. Everything y'all have touched has been the next level of that thing, whether it's a cooler or a bag or a cup. So we all eagerly await what that next
We got a lot
massive improvement of
Yeah.
products we've already.
Well, I wish I could talk more about those products that are coming down the pipeline, but I can tell you that I'm super excited about these products, and we are finding ways to add value to them, and it's really cool. It is a slow-moving dream. You know, some of these projects we've been working on for years, and product development is a slow-moving process, especially when you're doing something new that has new technology and you're innovating. It's a process that takes time, resources, good people, a lot of engineering support, a lot of supply chain development, and it just takes years to develop great product and bring them to market. But
Yeah.
I think when I look at our product roadmap and look at YETI and everything coming down and coming to market, whether it's this year, next year, and so on, I mean, it's the kind of stuff that like gives me so much confidence in the brand and the company going forward. And I look at YETI today, and you know, we're 12 years old, but it still feels like to me, and I think it still feels like it to most people there at YETI, that we're on the front end of something special. We're scratching the surface of our potential, and we're just at the beginning, and it truly feels that way.
It's well, let me tell you kind of what it means to me for a second.
Yeah.
So I was raised to appreciate quality goods, and I'm old enough at this point to remember a time where America itself was known for quality products. And somewhere along the line, capitalistic structure and profit sort of ate into that pride, and we started making stuff a little crappier over and over until profitability was the main concern and quality of the product wasn't. So that alienated me a little bit. I've always liked good guns, good pocket knives, good fishing poles, and then the record scratched when you got to cooler, right? So true sustainability is building stuff made of quality, things that will last. To me, that's sustainability. If it's going to fall apart, that's not sustainable. So to try to repair an old cooler and put new hinges on, then you see a new crack down the back with all that orange foam busting through. That was an unpleasant experience, and one that I just didn't need cold shit around anymore. Bring on the YETI. It's helped me to add the cooler to a long list of quality gear that I respect and enjoy keeping with me. It was the first time a cooler entered into the market with the fishing pole, with the rifle, where it belonged in that family of high quality goods. I carry it a little step farther. We all got to drink water out there in Texas. It's hot. Whether you're fishing or hunting, you need a ton of water. So your products have come along and allowed me to eliminate the single-use plastic container in my routine, which makes me feel really good about what I'm doing. I thank you guys for that. I would ask, what other stories from consumers you guys have gotten back through your years with the company now that have really inspired you to keep going and keep pushing quality products?
Yeah, you get a lot of great stories from our consumers, and I think the mentality of buying a YETI, whether it's a piece of drinkware or a cooler or some of the other products we're coming out with today, like the chair, the Hondo chair, and the Panga duffel bags. I think it's a mentality of buy it once, buy it for life, and go and invest in it and get the quality, but also the performance. Corey, our old VP of marketing, I think it's something that he came up with was like a mentality of pre-cycle. It's like you never recycle it, so it never makes it to the recycling. So it's kind of to your point of replacing taking our vacuum insulated bottles or jugs onto your boat, you're not recycling. When you buy that, you pre-cycle, and you're no longer are you recycling the 12 water bottles a day that are going through your boat and as you're guiding. And
But think about like all the river trips and different hikes I've done through Texas wilderness. I mean, components of those old coolers littered the ecosystem. A lid over here, a
you see them on the highway all the time.
When you see a flood or something,
coolers
you're
are
going to
everywhere.
see coolers everywhere. Never once have I seen a component of a Yeti. And in fact, at this point, I would say that is people's first choice in a product if they can do it. And the components of those other coolers are slowly rotting away and not showing up anymore.
That's right. That's right.
So that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
I think we can wrap after one more question or two. I'd like to know kind of, Yeti doesn't even take on its original meaning anymore. It's not a snow monster, and it's no longer just a hard cooler. It is really sort of a lifestyle brand with a culture built around it.
Yeah. Yeah.
What do you think? Why do you think it's that important to people? What is it about the products that is,
well,
y'all's strategy that has brought everyone into that?
And I don't know if it's our strategy, but it's definitely something that's happened. That Yeti was built off of this cooler, this Yeti Tundra, and then we saw the brand, and we saw the cooler starting to spill over into different end markets. Our frustration in ordinary coolers was hunting and fishing, and that's where our focus was in the marketplace. But you saw it spilling over into other lifestyles outside of hunting and fishing, and that was like the ranching and farming community, the construction, oil field, the barbecuing world, and so
rodeo, mountain sports,
right.
You name it.
That's
yeah.
right. And so Yeti became much bigger than hunting and fishing, and started representing all these pursuits outdoors, and for the same reason that Ryan and I were connected to the brand around hunting and fishing, it was connecting to other folks for other reasons. And I think that's why the brand has become way bigger than the product and way bigger than the original pursuits around hunting and fishing. And now Yeti has a meaning that represents a lifestyle that can be many things to many different people.
Well put. How about
That's
you,
good.
Ryan? Can you match that?
No. That was good.
It's a cool scene of like the dude chucking up his dirt bike on there.
Yes,
that
right.
would have crushed an older cooler.
Although
like,
we did ride
they
some
need
dirt bikes when
independent
we were
little
kids.
stands for that. They bring a separate stand, and now that
Yeah.
it's a multi-purpose tool in every category where it's used as well.
Yeah.
Well, thanks, man. Here's to y'all's success, and I appreciate
you.
being part of the team and enjoy the shit out of it.
And it's not over yet.
It's not over yet, so I look forward to what's next.
Thank you, JT.
Thank
Cool,
you.
man. You guys have a good one. Thanks again for listening to Drifting, presented by Yeti and hosted by me, JT Van Zandt. To listen to more episodes, visit yeti.com or search Drifting on iTunes.